Arctic governance is not only about maritime navigation issues mentioned by Professor Xinhua and Professor Chen. The Arctic issues cover a wider range. The issues like climate change, the natural resources utilization, maritime investigation, Arctic people, protection of Arctic people's rights, all these issues belong to Arctic issue. Many issues like climate change have implications at the global level. So active governance has close relevance to global governance. This is the background that countries like China, countries outside the Arctic region, engage in active governance. There's only one international treaty that regulates active governance. It is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Nevertheless, this convention was not formulated for the purpose of active governance. It is for the purpose of the sea governance. So many issues relating to active governance are not mentioned in the United Nations Convention on the Sea, Law of the Sea. There's no treaty like the Antarctic treaty in active governance. The countries surrounding the Arctic region, all the countries which have territory in the Arctic region have no interest in reaching such a treaty like Arctic treaty. There's only one multilateral institution. Actually, it is an intergovernmental dialogue institution, namely the Arctic Council in the field of Arctic governance. This council was established in 1996. The countries that have territory in the region are members of this council. They include the U.S., Russia, Canada, and 5 European Arctic countries. The next part is about the EU's participation in Arctic governance. Just now, I mentioned the Arctic Council. There are 5 EU. There are 3 as the EU members in the Council: Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. And 2 other European countries are also members of Arctic Council, as Norway and Iceland. In addition to these European members, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, and the Netherlands are also formal observers of this council. However, these European countries represent their own interests rather than the EU in Arctic Council. The EU has applied to be an observer of Arctic Council, but up to now, it has not been approved by the Council. The European Union has engaged actively in active governance in the document issued in 2007, Maritime Policy Actions. It was said that the European Union has a strong interest in participating in active governance. In another policy document issued in 2008, the European Union and the Arctic region, the European Union has announced its the issues it has in which it has interest. In 2012, the European Union issued the policy papers, policy papers developing European Union policy towards the Arctic region. Progress since 2008. Next steps. There are some relatively concrete measures in the fields like scientific research, climate change, natural resources utilization, fishery, which have been mentioned in this policy paper. And in the EU's scientific development plan, Horizon 2020, the EU announced that it will invest 20 million euros every year in scientific research regarding the active governance. So all these suggest that the EU participated in active governance actively. In regard to China-U.S. EU cooperation in active governance, first of all, we need to notice the establishment and development of China's EU strategic partnership. Since because this strategic partnership is about various dialogue mechanisms between China and the EU at various levels. China and the EU discussed Arctic governance issues both at the summit level and ministerial level. The two sides announced a joint communique in 2012. They recognized the increasing importance of the Arctic region. And in 2013, China and the EU committed to strengthen exchanges on Arctic affairs. As well, China and the EU have conducted a lot of academic exchanges on the issue of active governance. For instance, universities or think tanks from China and the Nordic countries have jointly held some international conferences, both in China and in Europe, in the field of Arctic governance. The last part is the prospect of China-EU cooperation. China and the EU have similar policies on the issues of climate change and free navigation. This lays the foundation for China and the EU to conduct mutual cooperation in Arctic governance. But there are some impediments or obstacles facing China and the EU. China is not a country that has a territory as in Arctic region. So China is perceived as an outsider. If China engages too much in Arctic governance, the legitimacy would be questioned by other countries, particularly by the Arctic countries. So China's restrained itself from engaging too much in Arctic issues. Secondly, European Union members, many European Union members have their own Arctic policies. Countries like Germany, France, Spain, Italy, Poland have issued their own policy papers on Arctic governance. So it would be hard for these European Union members to reach agreement on concrete measures. Concrete measures regarding Arctic governance. And this impedes China and the EU from further cooperation. Against this backdrop, China took measures to strengthen cooperation between itself and some Nordic countries. For instance, China and Iceland have signed a framework agreement on Arctic governance. In addition, China and Iceland have conducted a joint scientific investigation on issues like climate change and natural resources utilization. I think this trend will last in the foreseeable future because there are some obstacles between China and the EU in Arctic governance cooperation. Such is my presentation. Thank you for attention.